benefit claims is what is his encouragement of a languid recovery is perking up. So they're claiming that he's responding to a drop in jobless benefit claims. But pay attention to the rest of the article, and they explain that these jobless benefit claims in this very same article, they explain that the jobless benefit claims drop as a result of more people falling off the unemployment rolls. Quote, "We have seen increased evidence that a self-sustaining recovery in consumer and business spending may be taking hold," unquote, the central bank chief said in his first testimony to Congress since the Fed launched a controversial plan to buy an extra $600 billion in government bonds. That means we're going $600 billion in further debt to promote whatever conditions are actually being reported here, which we have to read between the lines because, of course, they're trying to make this sound far more promising than it actually is. Just a month ago, in an interview on the CBS program 60 Minutes, Bernanke voiced a degree of trepidation about the economy's rebound. His remarks on Friday were made public just an hour after the government reported the economy generated a disappointing 103,000 jobs in December. Bernanke, who said it would take 4 to 5 years for the labor market to get back to normal, showed no inclination toward cutting short the Fed's bond purchase program. In other words, they're pouring money into circulation because we're suffering a terminal sum of debt, which is forcing us to pay it out of circulation so fast. And ostensibly, assuming further federal debt at this ever-escalating rate of the bailouts that you're witnessing is going to save us from a process which itself predicates that they can only do this by assuming the ever greater sums of debt, which only push us further beyond a terminal sum of falsified indebtedness to a purported central banking system. The article goes on then to say, quote, "The Fed will not rush for the exit," unquote, said Lenova Kamileva, economist at Tillet Prebon, wherever that is. Quote, "The potential for further easing remains," easing they call it, "spending money into circulation at ever-escalating rates as further indebtedness beyond a terminal sum of indebtedness." They call that easing. Do you feel better about it because they use the term easing, which is mere double talk? The potential for further easing remains if weak labor and housing activity continue to depress inflation trends. Well, inflation, as we've explained, is caused by this artificial multiplication of falsified indebtedness to the so-called Federal Reserve, as industry therefore is forced to ever upwardly escalate its prices to maintain margins of solubility. Otherwise, industry fails or is expatriated, as we have seen for decades and decades. Financial markets, focused on the new jobs data, showed little reaction to Bernanke's remarks. Of course, we're tired of this. It's all lies. It's all pretension. It's all a deception that they can save a process which can only multiply artificial indebtedness into terminal failure. Listen to this, though. It says the U.S. jobless rate dropped to 9.4% from 9.8% last month. Underreported figures, supposedly decreasing 0.4%. But the decline was partly due, doesn't say how much, partly due to a troubling rise in the number of people exiting the workforce. They say they've exited the workforce because they've been unemployed so long, they've fallen off unemployment benefits. They're not even helping these people anymore, and so they're just simply considering them not to be employed not to be unemployed any longer. Of course, they haven't become employed, and so this is a further lie. Echoing Bernanke, Fed Board Governor Elizabeth Duke said in a separate speech that the recovery appeared to be gathering steam. By what evidence? But both hiring and inflation would likely remain subdued. In other words, she's refuting the fact that there would ever be that there is any evidence. Quote, "I am encouraged by signs that the recovery may have gained traction recently," unquote, Duke said. A member of the Board of Governors. What else? What other kind of lie would you expect them to tell you? The improvement in the economic background, what improvement, has prompted Wall Street investors to begin pondering a possible reversal in Fed policy as early as the end of this year. In the summer, few expected anything in the way of monetary tightening until at least 2012. So, as much as it's supposed to have improved for no evidence whatsoever, it can't even sustain further employment. We're not even creating jobs at the rate that we have to in order to maintain employment. But because so many people have had unemployment benefits so long that the benefits have expired to them, and they've fallen off the unemployment rolls merely because their benefits have expired, and these bastards no longer count them as unemployed. Somehow that's a sign that we're better, and they're going to tighten credit as a result of it. Interest rates are going to rise. Yet they go on to say, and there's a subtitle, deflation risk smaller, not gone. Of course it's not gone. You're subject to a process which can only, and you're witnessing it as he spends another $600 billion into circulation as further federal debt saddled on the backs of the people, which we can't even afford to service. So it's going to multiply by all the interest which we're not able to pay on it. And so this is just saddled on the people, and you're watching this debt multiply beyond a terminal sum of artificial debt, and they're only telling you that the deflation risk is not gone. Well, of course it's not gone, because if we were servicing all this additional debt, particularly, we would even need far, 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 far greater so-called rescue efforts than we're presently watching go by, which we can't even afford to service. All you're seeing happen is phenomenal sums of further debt being heaped upon you. And if you grow, as in their terms, just the least little bit, even if they consider it to be growth, by people falling off the unemployment rolls because their unemployment benefits have expired and they no longer consider these people in the job force, by their own obfuscations, for their own mistruths, they're going to raise interest on you. This is unbelievable that you suffer this, but you do. In his testimony to the Senate Budget Committee, Bernanke defended the Fed's bond purchases by highlighting the weaknesses in employment and what he saw as the risks associated with very low rates of inflation. Low increasing of prices is a risk to you. Why? Because the truth of the matter is, it's evidence of how weak the lie of economy is, this process which can only multiply artificial indebtedness upon you until you suffer terminal artificial indebtedness. That lie of economy is so weak that industry can't afford to increase its prices, as would sustain margins of solubility, and therefore that's the evidence of weakness, which he's responding to here. but he's not telling you that they're the problem, which is the only truth of the matter. The Federal Reserve System is the inevitable cause of this inevitable set of consequences that we suffer as a consequence of their purposed obfuscation of the currency and subversion of representation in order to persist in these crimes against us. Bernanke says, quote, persistently high unemployment by damping household income and confidence, as if confidence is the real cause of this, could threaten the strength and sustainability of the recovery. How ambiguous could you possibly be? And how could you, if you understand this, if you were qualified to be at the helm of this abomination which desolates the entire world, how, if you're qualified to be at the helm of it, can you not be but personally and intentionally lying to state that this is the cause of our problem, a damping of household income and confidence? Any country which has any confidence at all in a process which can only precipitate in inevitable terminal sums of artificial indebtedness is a country which is considering what can only destroy it. So now I'd like to play a few excerpts of this interview. It's very short, and we'll make a few comments on these and leave you to your consideration of where you stand in regard to all this.
Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke says the U.S. economy may be finally hitting its stride, even though growth remains too weak to put a real dent in the nation's jobless rate.
In fact, then, as the Reuters article has just explained, the only purported dent in the jobless rate, in fact, is that people have fallen off the unemployment rolls. As Bernanke is about to divulge here further, if we're paying attention to the math, we're not even creating jobs at a rate which would be necessary to sustain employment of those coming into the workforce.
The economic recovery that began a year and a half ago is continuing, although to date at a pace that has been insufficient to reduce the rate of unemployment significantly.
Offering absolutely no evidence of actual growth then, and while basing this prospect of growth on a jobless rate which is not even actually fallen, but by people falling off unemployment rolls, Bernanke is claiming that this non-existent growth is evidence of a persistent growth which has existed for years now, which, if you remember, they just told you that they're poised to punish by higher rates of interest, always, of course, ostensibly to quell, quote-unquote, overheated growth, terms which they've never explained to you and you can't possibly understand are to your benefit. Especially then when we consider that this $600 billion in further debt we're just assuming is saddled upon that fragile purported growth, and that much money is being poured into circulation effectively in such little time since the last time they poured it into circulation, merely then to sustain such little vital circulation, so much of which is dedicated to servicing a terminal sum of debt already, that we can't even realize any further increases in employment. how then is there actually any evidence of recovery whatsoever? And how, even more importantly, how can we possibly recover from a process which, as you can see from the very money they're introducing into circulation, how can we possibly recover from a process which can only multiply artificial indebtedness into